Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green are probably the easiest mainline games to complete a hardcore Nuzlocke in. It's usually easy to just blast through these games with overpowered high damage moves that virtually one-shot everything in sight. But what if I couldn't use any of them? Better yet, what if I couldn't use any damaging moves at all? The rules for this challenge are simple. To go along with standard hardcore Nuzlocke rules, I also cannot use a single move that does direct damage to the opposing Pokemon. I've decided to include moves like Counter, Mirror Coat, or Bide into that category. That means I have to rely entirely on indirect damaging moves like status conditions in order to defeat my opponents. I also won't be allowed to use Struggle. I am allowed to struggle with the first rival battle, as a Nuzlocke doesn't technically start until I receive Pokeballs, meaning I'm free to spam growls with Bulbasaur until my rival's Charmander is able to take him out, while inflating his already oversized ego in the process. Once Bulbasaur is level 7, it'll learn the move Leech Seed, but you might be wondering how I'm even supposed to get to level 7 in the first place if I can't attack anything.
Good question, Aguado.
It starts with catching all of the available encounters prior to the first gym, which is a little bit more difficult to do seeing as I can't damage any of them before throwing a ball. Mankey cooperates, but Rattata and Pidgey decided to be a bit more difficult, and I made a point to remind them of that for the rest of their godforsaken lives. With the early route encounters all captured, I head into Viridian Forest and catch a Caterpie, who will be an excellent Pokemon for this style of play, eventually. None of the Pokemon I captured can do any indirect damage either. This is where the next part of my plan comes into effect. You see, in Viridian Forest, you can encounter wild Metapod or Kakuna that only know the move Harden. All of the Pokemon I encountered have some sort of non-damaging move like Leer or Growl that I can use, except for 3 Balls the Pidgey, who on top of being a pain to catch, also sucks the most out of any of the encounters. Once Metapod runs out of Hardens, which takes 30 turns, it starts to use Struggle, which slowly does recoil damage to itself. I switch between my team members to give them all EXP, but also spread out the damage they take from struggles in order to avoid losing anyone to a crit. This requires multiple trips back to the Pokemon Center, a ton of patience, and probably some sort of medication I'm not currently receiving because this is insane. Why am I doing this to myself? After an eternity of this, eventually I get the move Leech Seed, and from there, switch training becomes a lot more manageable, as instead of waiting to be hit by struggle, I can now keep everyone healthy while sapping the life from my enemies. While it's difficult to get everyone an adequate amount of EXP, as currently only one of my Pokemon is capable of doing any indirect damage, I do manage to get enough to level up Butterfree to level 13 where she learns Poison Powder. Even without damage-dealing Grass-type moves at my disposal, Brock is still a pushover. Leech Seed heals up a lot of the damage his Pokemon do, and spamming Growls makes his already mediocre attacks even weaker. With Geodude finally down, Onix comes in, but at level 15 Bulbasaur learns Sleep Powder, meaning he's now free to heal up with Leech Seed while Brock's Onix takes a nap. It should come as no surprise that these battles take forever, so I obviously won't be going through them turn by turn. Eventually we're able to win the War of Attrition and earn ourselves our first badge. I also won't be covering every encounter, as with a regular hardcore Nuzlocke there are a lot of them to go around. However, I will cover the ones that are relevant, like the female Nidoran I was lucky enough to find on Route 3 with the Poison Point ability, giving me another way to do indirect damage. In Mount Moon I catch a Zubat who's also excellent for this challenge, although the 55% accuracy Supersonic isn't the most reliable move. I try my best to level up the team before the rival battle, but I definitely neglected to train up a few of the less useful Pokemon in the party. Instead, opting to lean on the much more useful Compound-Eyes Butterfree to put Pidgeotto to sleep so I can safely bring in Ivysaur to hit a Leech Seed. Once it wakes up, I hit it with a Poison Powder, and since it seems determined to spam sand attacks instead of actual attacks, Butterfree and Ivysaur remain at full HP. It does finally switch to Gusts and hits one last quick attack before going down. Rattata suffers a similar fate to Pidgeotto, and this brings in his Charmander. The issue for this strategy is a lot of the Pokemon that learn moves that fit into this challenge tend not to enjoy being lit on fire. Thankfully, his spicy salamander likes to take naps. I decide to send in Pidgey to try and sand attack it while it's asleep, but it wakes up and hits an Ember again. I can't afford to switch in anyone more important, so I just have to hope sand attack does its job, and it doesn't. Did my earlier grudge against 3 balls play a part in my decision making? Perhaps it did. but being only level 13 coming into a battle against a level 18 Charmander certainly didn't help. Pidgey didn't have a way of training itself with non-damaging moves, and while Sand Attack could have been useful, there really wasn't much else it was going to be doing this run. Thank you, 3 Balls. You will always be remembered as one of the Pokemon of all time. Her untimely and completely unavoidable death lets Dr. Sleep do what she does best and help us finish off the battle, while almost losing Zubat to an Ember as well. I really need to take the time to train everyone else up to the level cap, or as close to it as they can get. In case you were wondering how tedious every battle is, that one alone was an 11-minute clip, and I didn't even bother recording the Abra section because it came out last and it doesn't know any attacking moves. If you think that's bad, let me introduce you to the next layer of hell that is this challenge, Nugget Bridge. As of now, I've exclusively relied on Leech Seed and Poison Powder to work together to do enough damage to defeat enemy Pokemon. There's a problem with that strategy though. Leech Seed doesn't affect Grass-type Pokemon, and obviously Poison types are immune to being poisoned. That means Lass Alley and her Oddish and Bellsprout are going to somehow be the most difficult Pokemon of the run so far. The only way I can damage them is by relying on 55% accuracy Supersonics from Butterfree and Zubat while hoping for self-hits from Confusion. Oddish also has a ton of PP on all of her moves, granted none of them are threatening, but she won't be using Struggle anytime soon. Eventually she takes herself out. Bellsprout actually has a good attack stat and a poor defense stat, meaning I can hit it with some Leers to make the self-hits do a lot more damage. The problem is it also knows Wrap, so I have to be careful not to get trapped at too low of an HP. When it finally does self-hit at -6 defense, it almost takes itself out in one shot. Another successful battle that still has me questioning why I am doing this to myself. My reward for making it through the gauntlet of poison types is a Bellsprout of my own. Lass Haley on Route 25 is the last trainer in the way before I can get to Bill's house. Her and her 2 Oddish once again test my patience and my sanity, but through stubborn arrogance, I march on. It's finally time to head back to Cerulean and take on Misty. I do my best to level up the team to the level cap in order to avoid another Pidgey situation, and it's a lot easier to do that now that I have more than 2 Pokemon capable of consistently doing damage. It also helps having an additional grass type to take hits from Staryu's water pulses. Another side effect from this strategy is that gym leaders will almost always use a potion on their lead Pokemon, as Leech Seed and Poison Powder usually bring them into heal range, which is great because I would much rather deal with Staryu being healed up than Starmie. Ivysaur is starting to take too much damage, but he gets off the Leech Seed and Poison Powder. Thankfully, Weepinbell is healthy enough to take a couple of water pulses as the glimmer of light fades from the shiny gem on Starmie. Over on Route 111, I'm fortunate enough to catch a Drowsy. Psychic types are pretty great, and its high special defense and array of status moves could prove to be useful. That is, if I bothered to level it up before the rival battle on the SSN. Even with being 4 levels lower than Kadabra, she tanks Confusions pretty well, which is great because basically everyone else is weak to them. A Hypnosis puts it to sleep so Ivysaur is able to hit a Leech Seed and start the timer on its life. Kadabra wakes up and hits a second crit with Confusion, and Drowsy misses another disable. I can't really switch anyone in, so goodbye Drowsy. You weren't great, but that's probably on me. Her death does allow me to put Kadabra to sleep, meaning by the time it finally wakes up, it can only hit 1 Confusion onto Butterfree before going down. We're not out of the woods yet, as our rival starter evolved into a Charmeleon. Thankfully, it's still slower than my little Butterfly and gets slept. That relief is short-lived as it wakes up as Ivysaur comes in and hits an Ember that fortunately doesn't crit or burn. The Leech Seed has been planted, and now I have to send in Butterfree, who needs to dodge a crit, and she does. I'm not gonna lie, if she got crit there, I'd be in a lot of trouble going forward. His stupid lizard finally stays asleep for long enough to let me regain some HP with Leech Seed, and Nidorina's bulk means she can safely stay in and take a couple of non-critical hit Embers when it finally wakes up. With Charmeleon almost dead, I send in Zubat, who I absolutely should have evolved before this fight, because a critical hit Ember would have taken him out. Now I have to risk another crit because Charmeleon survived with what must be 1 HP. Thankfully, he dodges another crit and survives with just 3 HP thanks to the Leech Seed heal. His Raticate is last, and fortunately doesn't know Pursuit, so I can get Zubat to safety and finish off the battle with the trio that up until this point are carrying the run. The matchup against Lieutenant Surge is not as intimidating as the rival battle, as instead of flying, fire, and psychic type moves, he mostly fires off resistive electric type attacks. Surge uses a super potion on Voltorb, which is once again a welcome sight instead of seeing it being used on his ace Raichu. It does take a while for Leech Seed and Poison to do their job, but my tag team of grass types outlast the angry Pokeball. A Cherry Berry heals paralysis on Ivysaur in order to get a Leech Seed into Pikachu, but I know I can't cure every paralysis we'll be struck by. Annoyingly, this little rat starts spamming double teams, which thankfully happens after I already hit the Leech Seed, meaning while I can't put it to sleep or poison it because I can't land an attack, it also isn't attacking me. A Poison Powder finally connects, and instead of doing anything else, Lieutenant Surge uses a full heal on Pikachu, who is one tick away from death to Leech Seed anyways. Nice one, idiot. Ivysaur Leech Seeds Raichu then gets crit by a Shockwave, but thanks to a great special defense stat, he's more than safe to stay in and hit a Poison Powder. 84 years later, his Raichu goes down and I've got my third badge. So far, the gym leaders haven't been much of an issue. It's the rival battles and random trainers along the way that are causing a lot more problems. That trend doesn't change here because up ahead is a mandatory battle against Picnicker Alicia and her 2 Oddish and 2 Bellsprout.
This is my hell.
I'll spare all of you from the insane amount of time this battle took, but the combination of Butterfree and Golbat Supersonics combined with defense drops eventually led to her Pokemon all knocking themselves out. Not exactly the most riveting gameplay, but it is effective. Let's hope there aren't too many more mandatory Grass-type Pokemon up ahead. Before descending to that circle of hell, I do have a mandatory battle against Picnicker Martha and her Oddish and Bulbasaur, but by this point the squad has it down to a science and takes her out rather easily. Erika, on the other hand, won't be nearly as easy. So far, I've only had to deal with unevolved grass poison types, but she has both a Victory Bell and a Vileplume. And Tangela is also there, technically. Thankfully, there's a glimmer of hope, a savior, and the Pokemon that is the sole reason why I chose Leaf Green over Fire Red, Vulpix. On routes 7 and 8, the only possible encounters other than Vulpix are pretty common, meaning there's a high probability of being able to all but guarantee one thanks to the species clause. The legacy of 3 Balls the Pidgey lives on. Thanks for existing. Because I don't have to bother waiting for it to learn Flamethrower, I'm free to evolve him into a Ninetales once he learns Confuse Ray at level 21, and more importantly, Will-O-Wisp at level 17. Being able to burn grass and poison type Pokemon is really going to help a lot, both in terms of winning battles and also keeping me from losing my mind trying to land Supersonics then begging for self hits. The department store also nets me some excellent TMs like Light Screen and Reflect, as well as Attract. That comes in handy right away as I'm lucky enough to have found a male Vulpix, meaning I can use it to seduce her Victory Bell because Game Freak's baseline assumption is all Pokemon are inherently straight. I suppose they do allow for interspecies love, so they're not entirely close-minded. The combination of Attract and Confusion should also allow Ninetales to avoid being hit, and it helps that Victory Bell also just whiffs a Stun Spore on her own. He does eventually get paralyzed, and I need him to stay healthy for Vileplume, so I have Golbat come in and bait out status moves that no longer affect Ninetales thanks to the paralysis. Tangela comes in next because, as I mentioned before, she definitely exists. Her existence won't last for much longer though, as she's not able to avoid being poisoned unlike her teammates. She does delay the inevitable by going for an Ingrain, which heals up some of the poison damage, and her base defense is really high, so in order for Confusion to actually do damage, I'll need to drop her defense. All of this takes forever, but eventually it does go down, but not before burning Erika's Hyper Potion. I get a free switch into Ninetales on a Stun Spore from Vileplume, and while Acid does hurt, eventually I'm able to land the trifecta of obnoxious attacks to burn, confuse, and immobilize it by love all at once. Ninetales is built for this challenge. His fourth move, being Tail Whip, is also perfect, pairing defense drops with Confusion in order to speed up the process. And by speed up, I mean instead of moving at a snail's pace of roughly 0.03 miles per hour, battles now move at the brisk pace of the average garden slug at 0.05 miles per hour. I let Golbat come in and watch her flower wilt and die. Thanks to the heroics of Ninetales, we've made it through one of the most challenging battles of the run, which might be one of the only times that's ever been true of Erika. With the level cap all the way up to 43 and a solution to any poison or grass type Pokemon in my way, this next section of the game is relatively easy, albeit time consuming. That isn't helped by the fact that Golbat keeps trying and failing to evolve into a Crobat after every level up. A brilliant decision that really enhances the gameplay experience. All of the rival battles battles have been exhausting, and 2 of them have caused the only deaths of this run so far, but the one in Pokemon Tower is finally a breeze thanks to the level difference. I try not to cover every battle if I think they're boring, but that is even more true in a run like this, where each battle takes a minimum of 10 minutes. Once he's out of the way, I do catch a relevant Pokemon in Ghastly, as its learn set is particularly good for this type of challenge, although it is yet another poison type Pokemon. So far, 5 of the 6 team members I'm consistently using are poison types, and up ahead are the poison and psychic type gyms, so I'll need to figure out a plan. That starts by catching myself a big, beefy Snorlax. While it can't do any damage in its current state, it can soak up tons of hits as a useful pivot after my other team members status our opponents. Over in the Safari Zone, not only do I manage to catch the encounter that I run into, but that encounter happens to be an excellent one, or excellent one, if you will.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Before taking on the gym leaders, I decide to deal with Team Rocket and Silph Co first. This time our rivals' Pokemon are fully evolved, including a Pidgeot and a Charizard, meaning my team full of grass and bug types and my Will-O-Wisp strategy are running into a roadblock here. The one-turn wake-up from Pidgeot certainly isn't helping, but this is where Snorlax can come in and put in some work. While it's more known for its special defense, its massive HP stat still helps a lot. Yeah, lower my attack with a Feather Dance. That'll help. Good one, Gary. Snorlax does know Yawn, so it can at least contribute a little more than being a meat shield. Another hidden issue with this challenge is managing my moves. Yawn, Confuse Ray, Leech Seed all only have 10 PP. I can't attack, obviously, so I also have to burn moves like those if I want to leave a Pokemon in, meaning I have to be really careful with which ones I use. Thankfully, Butterfree's Poison Powder has 35, meaning I can spam that forever if I want to. Instead, I choose to spam Flashes, which don't work as Execute manages to land a Stun Spore anyways. It lands another on Snorlax before going down, and Alakazam comes in. It doesn't know Psychic yet, but switching in Venusaur to Leech Seed this thing later will be a real issue. Another reason Snorlax is so valuable is it can also heal itself and cure its status conditions with Rest, making it an even more useful damage sponge. After a Yawn, Leech Seed, and Poison Powder hit the Gyarados, it's only a matter of time before it falls too. Right as it's about to go down, I send in Ninetales in order to avoid having to switch it in on Charizard. This means it can hit a Confuse Ray right away and start going for Tail Whips. The reason this thing is such a problem is because all the Pokemon I want to use to Poison or Leech Seed it would get obliterated by its Fire and Flying attacks. Unfortunately, I don't have a choice because it's doing too much damage with Wing attacks to Ninetales. This is also true of Snorlax, who's now too low on the switch-in, and I can't risk him. Thankfully, Ninetales has the Flash Fire ability, meaning I can always switch in safely on a Flamethrower. I decide the only thing I can do here is confuse it and swap to Victory Bell, hoping for a Confusion self-hit that allows me to put it on a timer with Poison Powder. This means she's gonna have to dodge a crit, and she does, and doesn't miss Poison Powder. What a legend. I swap around as the poison starts to tick away, and while Golbat is paralyzed, it is relatively healthy and not weak to Charizard's attacks. A Smokescreen makes him miss a Confuse Ray, and Charizard has one more tick of HP to go. I can't switch anyone else in, so Golbat is going to need to avoid yet another crit, and she does. Although, if she died here, I wouldn't have had to deal with the failed evolution thing anymore, but I suppose being mildly annoying isn't enough of a reason to celebrate her potential death. This battle footage was almost 17 minutes, by the way. We've only got 4 gym badges so far. While I could have made it 5 by challenging Koga before doing this and getting the TM for Toxic, I had a different prize in mind: Lapras. Lapras not only gives us a new type of Pokemon, but it also learns some excellent moves for this challenge. Oh, yeah, and I defeat Giovanni again. This guy needs to know when to quit. His battles aren't even worth narrating, and I can't even do damage. Pretty pathetic stuff from the supposed villain. You'd think now would be a great time to challenge Koga, but I actually decide to go for Sabrina instead. Thankfully, Synchronize doesn't work on Sleep Powder. Having Exeggutor is particularly clutch for this battle, as it's really bulky, part Psychic type, and gives me another Leech Seed user, meaning I can avoid bringing Venusaur into the Psychic type gym. Electrode makes their video debut and sets up a light screen before giving way to Ninetales. Ninetales eventually wins the fight against Kadabra, and that brings out Mr. Mime. Now, almost every playthrough I've done of these games, I've had something that can basically one-hit KO this thing with a physical attacking move. Obviously, that is not the case here. What I failed to consider is this thing could stack up Calm Minds and baton pass them to her Alakazam, which would almost certainly result in a wipe. I can't knock it out quickly, so I can't prevent it from boosting its stats. My only move now that I missed a Leech Seed and couldn't start the damage timer on it is putting it to sleep for as long as I can and trying to spam Flash to lower its accuracy to -6. If I can't stop it from baton passing stat changes, I might as well make whatever comes in blind as a bat. I swap into Electrode and my strategy pays off early with a Psybeam miss, meaning I can set up a light screen and give myself at least a little cover from a non-critical hit. Mr. Mime finally baton passes into Venomoth.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
You do all of that only to set up for Venomoth instead of Alakazam? Are you sure you're a real psychic? Still, at +6, this thing will still cause a ton of pain. That is, if it actually lands a hit. It finally does, but thanks to a light screen and a special defense boost from Charge, it does next to no damage. Venomoth is about to get taken out, and I need someone to deal with whoever comes in next, so I bank on another whiff as Ninetales comes in, and Psybeam does in fact miss as Venomoth goes down. This means as Mr. Mime comes back in, or I guess Mrs. Mime? Ninetales can hit an attract as Sabrina goes for a full heal. That doesn't really help, as now I can just burn the gender fluid baton passer, who eventually gets annoyed to death by attract and confusion, and now all that's left is Alakazam. This is why Lapras was so important. See, not only does Lapras have shell armor, meaning I never have to worry about critical hits, but it also knows the move Perish Song. Every single final Pokemon from here on out will have nowhere to run as their turns on this earth are numbered. The clock strikes 0 and Alakazam faints, and we earn our 5th badge. We're making progress. That battle only took 14 minutes thanks to Perish Song cutting the final Pokemon down in 3 turns instead of what feels like 300. We've evolved from Garden Slug to a Tortoise, topping out at a speedy 0.08 miles per hour. Now it's time to handle Koga. The tricky part with his teamer is coughing and wheezing because at any moment they could go boom and take someone down with them. The lower their HP goes, the more likely it is they go for self-destruct, so it's important to try and keep them asleep or confused so they're unlikely to attack. And if I can't safely do this, lower their attack with Nidoqueen. That's exactly what happens with Coughing number 1, whose self-destruct does a pathetic amount of damage. This brings in Muck, who's actually the most annoying to deal with because of Minimize, but Aurora sends it packing and brings in Wheezing. The downside here is Wheezing usually comes in last, meaning it won't explode, but now it can. Snorlax comes in and gets crit by a Sludge, but thanks to immunity it can't get poisoned. Arrest undoes the hard work Wheezing put in, and both of our beefy boys fall asleep at the same time. Venusaur gets the Leech Seed to connect, and now he's on a timer. Nidoqueen is back in to growl and confuse it just in case of an explosion, but because Koga uses a Hyper Potion, it allows me to stack up even more growls. It never does go for explosion though, and just dies with a whimper instead of a bang. Koga tries to send Muck back in, and this time Roar misses thanks to Minimize. Twice in a row. This could be a problem. Thankfully, a 4th Roar finally does the trick and brings in the other Coughing. This one, seeing how long the other battles lasted, wants no part of any of this and blows himself up immediately before I could even drop its attack, but thankfully it doesn't crit and Nidoqueen survives. Now I can finally deal with this Muck, although I briefly forget I can just Perish Song it and waste some time putting it to sleep and confusing it before remembering I don't need to do any of that. Whoops. These battles take a while. The more turns they take means the more RNG you're potentially exposed to, and the more likely it is that you're going to make a mistake. Thankfully, this one wasn't critical, but the length of these battles certainly threatens to test my mental fortitude as this challenge rolls along. The next battle is with Blaine. His fire-blasting dogs and ponies make it a bit hard to justify bringing both Leech Seed Mons to the battle, but Venusaur is pretty specially bulky, so it's safe at full HP from a non-crit, assuming Growlithe were to wake up, but it doesn't. Ninetales' Flash Fire ability makes for the perfect pivot whenever they are awake, and we're going to need to rely on his Confusion and Tail Whip spam for some damage here. Thankfully, Blaine's first dog, while adorable, is a bit of an idiot and hits itself in Confusion a few times and speeds things up. Anticipating a stomp from Ponyta, I swap into Butterfree hoping to put it to sleep, but this idiot goes for Fire Spin, which thankfully is a terrible attack, but seriously, why are you going for Fire Spin into my Fire-type Pokemon with Flash Fire? Are you dense? Now Butterfree is trapped in a Vortex of Fire. I'm no entomologist, but I'm smart enough to figure out butterflies don't do well inside of a fire vortex. She's finally freed up, so I get her back to safety just in time to avoid a wake up, snap out of confusion, and a fire blast. That was a close call. This time it goes for bounce, so I bring in a new team member that I got right here on the island, then had to train forever to get to the level cap, Omastar. It was well worth it though, as his excellent defense and moveset are really useful. It learns Protect by level up, and Tickle lowers both attack and defense, meaning Confusion Self hits will still do respectable amounts of damage, while actual hits on us by physical attacks won't do much. This time Butterfree avoids the Fire Tornado and puts it to sleep, but a one-turn wake-up risks Venusaur to the same fate, but this dumb horse just goes for a stomp. Really have no idea what the AI is doing here. Am I losing my mind, or is Blaine? Anyways, eventually his little horse takes itself out and his bigger, dumber horse comes in. Thankfully its stupidity causes a Confusion Self hit right away, which Blaine actually uses a full heal to get rid of. Eventually I'm able to get set up with a Leech Seed, and with its attack lowered, its stomps are doing less than Leech Seed is healing, so Ninetales is at full HP by the time its last HP ticks away. All that's left is his Arcanine. A Confuse Ray makes the swap into Lapras a bit safer, although he was never really in any danger. Arcanine is, though, as a Perish Song comes in and seals his fate. After multiple Giovanni battles fell by the wayside for the sake of the pace of this video, we've arrived at the only one I can't skip over, and the only one worth covering. Exeggutor is back, and this time she's equipped with a learned set of Reflect, Leech Seed, Poison Powder, and Sleep Powder. A true master of pissing off her opponents. Rhyhorn dies slow enough to prompt a Hyper Potion here instead of on one of his more threatening mons, before eventually going down to Leech Seed and Poison, as well as some recoil damage from its own takedowns. Thanks for the help. Nidoqueen comes in, who's obviously going to be a lot more difficult to deal with, considering I couldn't bring Ninetales to this fight, seeing as all of Giovanni's Pokemon know Earthquake. Instead, I get to unbench Haunter, whose Levitate ability and Ghost typing completely mitigate anything she can throw at us aside from a weak Poison Sting. Armed with an obnoxious learn set of Hypnosis, Confuse Ray, Curse, and Destiny Bond, this thing truly epitomizes what this run is all about. Once Nidoqueen is asleep, Venusaur can come in and hit Leech Seed before returning to the safety of Haunter. It's important that I keep him healthy enough so I can go for Curse more than once, as it cuts his HP directly in half and he takes some damage from Poison Stings. With the Leech Seed heal, he's able to stay above 50% as Nidoqueen goes down. Giovanni makes things easier by bringing in Dugtrio, who can't hit Haunter at all. It's that type of decision making that gets you cut from the rest of the video. Dugtrio gets a quick wake up and hits a weak slash onto Exeggutor before getting seeded as well, and Haunter is able to heal back up to near full thanks to Giovanni using a potion. As the curse damage finishes off Dugtrio, Haunter is still well above half and healthy enough to go for yet another curse against Nidoking, who also can't hit him with anything but Poison Sting. If I didn't have so many Pokemon available to me, I would have allowed him to evolve into a Gengar. I felt like even though this challenge is tedious and difficult, giving myself a Gengar might have been too powerful, as evidenced by the power of Haunter here. While he's the MVP of this fight, Lapras remains the undisputed closer. I decide to mercy kill the Rhyhorn by putting it to sleep, so it doesn't have to see the final count of Perish Song tick to 0, but it decides to wake up and witness its own demise. 8 badges down without a single damage move and only 2 deaths, but the hardest part is yet to come. Because my encounters are only limited to normal hardcore Nuzlocke rules, I actually have enough Pokemon to get the item finder to get leftovers, meaning I can stall out battles even more than before. I am truly the most obnoxious trainer in all of Kanto. Trying to challenge me for that title is Gary. This is the last fight where Butterfree will reliably outspeed Pidgeot, who just one turn wake up and wing attacks Venusaur anyways. Not an ideal start. He's safe to stay in and hit a Leech Seed anyways, but taking 2 wing attacks was, let's call it, suboptimal. Thankfully, he learned the move Synthesis in order to keep himself healthy. Pidgeot once again gets a one-turn wake-up, but this time just lowers Ninetales' attack. Wing attacks don't do much damage, and it's at this point I should mention that whenever I had to grind up the team, I primarily chose to fight wild Pokemon that gave defense, HP, special defense, and speed EVs, so Ninetales has quite a bit of extra bulk. Exeggutor is the designated Rhyhorn Slayer apparently, as she deals with Garys as well. This baits in Charizard, who remains the biggest problem, but not one that Ninetales can't handle. That is, until she gets crit by a slash, which offsets the reflect, which then wears off on the following turn. That means it's time for Big Daddy to come back. Toxic is arguably the best move for my team, and I only get 1 TM to use. Ideally I would get to use it on someone fast, but I instead opt to use it on Snorlax. With his excellent bulk, leftovers, and the only Protect TM, he's a true tank. The Great Wall of Kanto. He outlasts Charizard, and I decide to save him for later and let Butterfree handle the pile of eggs. Where Snorlax really comes in clutch is against Alakazam. Thanks to his immunity ability, he can safely Toxic without worrying about Synchronized poisoning him in return. Alakazam boosted his special attack enough where crit Psychic is pretty scary, so I bring in Lapras who can't be crit. Then go back to Snorlax so he can watch his poison finish off Alakazam, like a serial killer returning to the scene of the crime. Last is his Gyarados, who gets the same treatment all final Pokemon get. Thankfully there aren't any difficult mandatory battles in Victory Road and we make it to the Indigo Plateau. I've decided to stick with the crew that brought us here, with the exception being Electrode over Butterfree, as it just doesn't have the speed stat to put the biggest threats to sleep. The first victim of my obnoxious strategy will be Lorelei. Right away, I'm met with an equally annoying Pokemon. With Rest and Safeguard, this thing threatens to put a wrench into my plans immediately. Thankfully, it's too dumb to know that and gets itself poisoned. I know Poison won't do enough to get the KO, and she's going to either Rest or Full Restore, so I take the opportunity to switch into Venusaur for free and get in a Leech Seed. This time around she hits a Safeguard right before I can click Toxic, which is why I contemplated having a speedy Toxic user instead of Snorlax, but ultimately I still think I made the right call. Leech Seed finally takes down her Dugong after what felt like an eternity. Cloyster burns another Toxic PP with Protect, so I need to be careful in order to not run out of them. Cloyster continues to Protect stall, not realizing that all it's doing is letting the poison damage stack up. Before poisoning Slowbro, I put it to sleep in order to Leech Seed it, then I swap around, which hurts a bit thanks to the spikes that Cloyster set up. Still, we're feeling pretty cozy here. Lapras comes in before Jinx, which is actually great because Jinx is much more annoying to deal with. Eventually Snorlax hits a Toxic and waits it out. He's running low on PP, but with Jinx being the only one left and Snorlax being unfazed by Attract, he's able to put her to sleep with a Yawn so Lapras can come in and seal her fate. Next up is Bruno, a man who settles his beef with physical attacks, aka my arch nemesis. His Onix is obviously not an issue, and getting him to waste a full restore on it is once again very helpful. Hitmonchan technically has super effective moves against Exeggutor, but its special attack is so bad that it just doesn't matter. Bruno seems aware of this and opts for resisted Sky Uppercuts into my Psychic type Pokemon while Reflect is up. Hitmonlee is able to break my Reflect and still do a decent chunk of damage, so finally there's something that presents us with an actual challenge. Bruno proves that point quickly by hitting a critical hit Mega Kick that takes Exeggutor to just 12 HP. I knew she was safe from a crit, but that still doesn't feel good to watch. Leech Seed and Leftovers help, but she's still way too low to stay in, so I have to swap to Venusaur, who thankfully dodges a crit Mega Kick. As long as I can keep him relatively healthy, he's safe, so a Synthesis does just that as Hitmonlee goes down to Poison and Leech Seed damage. Bruno gives me what I thought would be a break with Onix, but a crit Earthquake means I actually have to pay attention. A Synthesis keeps him healthy and a Sleep Powder connects, meaning I can try to bring Exeggutor back in so she can get some Leech Seed and Leftovers heal while his pile of rocks takes a nap. This also lets her get up another Reflect, so when it does wake up, she doesn't take much damage. Bruno heals Onix, which by extension means he really healed us, as by the time it falls, Exeggutor is back to nearly full HP. Last is his Machamp. A Sleep Powder will help prevent it from stacking up bulk ups, and once it's asleep, all the working out on Earth won't save it from a Perish Song from Lapras. It does eventually wake up, but just hits a Scary Face before its count goes to 0. Next up is Agatha, who I think might be the most difficult trainer in the region to deal with. Her Pokemon are all Poison type and her Ghosts are all fast. This renders a few team members to be pretty much useless. It doesn't help that I start off the battle by going for a taunt with Electrode, completely forgetting that taunt wears off when I switch. Whoops. At least Venusaur hits a Leech Seed before Gengar gets off a double team, so I guess it worked out alright. I swap around letting Leech Seed do its job, considering I don't really have much of a chance of hitting this thing with moves like Yawn or Confuse Ray anyways after all those double teams. After a full restore, I do try my luck with Ninetales, and he does manage to hit an Attract, proving love, or I guess lust, can transcend this plane of existence and even impact ghosts. Lapras does get poisoned in all my switching around, which is unfortunate, and right before going down after over 6 minutes of footage, her Gengar hits one final Confuse Ray as a parting gift. She still has 5 Pokemon left. Snorlax can come in and put it to sleep with a Yawn and take a nap of his own at the same time. Leech Seed and Will-O-Wisp are gonna have to do a lot of heavy lifting here. Thankfully, Agatha's female Pokemon cannot resist the Ninetales of my Ninetales. Golbat is having a terrible time out here between Attract, Burn, Confusion, and Leech Seed. Just an obnoxious combination. Arbok breaks through her Attract to hit a Screech, then proceeds to hit one on Venusaur and Snorlax as well. Eventually, it goes for a Sludge Bomb as I bring in Venusaur and I can hit a Leech Seed, which I only have 3 PP left for. I have Exeggutor, but she's weak to all these Poison-type moves, so it's hard to find a time to bring her in. Arbok eventually eventually falls while dealing with a similar set of problems Golbat did, and that brings in her ace Gengar. I immediately get a taste of my own medicine by being put to sleep by a hypnosis, but mercifully she misses one on Venusaur and I get the Leech Seed set up. Because Ninetales is still asleep, I can pivot into him when I expect a hypnosis, then bait out Sludge Bombs or Nightmares into Venusaur as Gengar's health slowly whittles away. I send in Lapras on a weak Sludge Bomb as the last Leech Seed comes through in order to get a Perish Song onto Haunter, who would rather stab itself in the eye than suffer through this battle any longer. I don't blame her. This clip is 19 minutes long and I sped up through parts of it. I never thought I'd be happy to see Lance, but here we are. I can go back to poisoning Pokemon. He burns a full restore on Gyarados and I respond by, well, burning his Gyarados. Lots of switching around and a weak Hyper Beam into Exeggutor means I can set up a Reflect perfectly timed with Gyarados going down to Leech Seed. That makes Aerodactyl's wing attacks into Snorlax and Electrode feel like a light gust of wind. The Hyper Beam it hits right before going down without Reflect up felt like more like a slap in the face though. Dragonite loves to go for Safeguard, but I have to try and status it, and decide to go for a Yawn as to not waste a Toxic PP. It sees a KO on Electrode, so I have to swap into Lapras on a Hyper Beam, but the recharge turn means I can bring in Venusaur to finally get a Leech Seed on this thing and put it on a timer. The downside is I have to swap into Lapras again on a Hyper Beam, and if he gets too low it'll be hard to get him back in for a Perish Song. Thankfully Leech Seed helps out a bit on the recharge turn. Dragonite finally locks itself into Outrage, which is a special attacking move in this gen, so Snorlax can come in and tank them while getting to land a Toxic now that Safeguard is done. Before taking its last breath, it goes for another Safeguard one turn too early, and as his Safeguard expires, so does his life. The Dragonair are a bit annoying with Shed Skin, but they're also really not a threat, as 40 HP Dragon Rages aren't exactly a problem for my 287 HP Snorlax. Eventually, both Dragonair go down, and with that, we're on to the champion. It all comes down to this. One final rematch with Gary. An obnoxious, cocky man who is more annoying than anything my team could ever even dream of being. But battles aren't fought with words. Fittingly, the final battle of this run is also the longest clip, clocking it at just over 20 minutes. Buckle up. A Toxic into Pidgeotto and a swap into Electrode on an Aerial Ace start things off, but more importantly, I use Taunt correctly this time. We get one of the full restores out of the way early, but Snorlax misses a Toxic. He only has 4 left, so that's a real concern. He lands his next one and eventually it takes out Pidgeot. Electrode being in baits out Rhydon, who hits a somewhat weak Earthquake into Exeggutor, whose Rhyhorn skills clearly translate to their evolution as well. Gyarados is in next, but he's completely walled off by Venusaur. Having to rely on 40 damage Dragon Rages in the champion battle? Yeah, that's how you know you're down bad. Unfortunately, with regular poison damage, Gyarados is in range for full restore number 2. Snorlax lands a Toxic and stalls for a bit, then Venusaur comes in for his final synthesis as Gyarados goes down to the poison. This brings in Alakazam, so I send in Snorlax, who gets crit by a Psychic on the switch, but still manages to be above half HP before leftovers. Alakazam goes for a Reflect, and Gary really never learns, does he? I'm running low on moves for Snorlax, and Poison isn't quite working fast enough, so I decide it's time for a sacrifice. Electrode can come in and take a hit, and get off one last light screen before getting taken out. Thank you for everything, and I'm sorry I embarrassed you against Agatha with that taunt situation. This leads to a safe pivot into Exeggutor to set up a Reflect while the third and final full restore comes in. Leech Seed basically heals all of the HP Psychic did through the light screen, and with the full restores out of the way, it's safe to bring Snorlax back in. The problem is, he only has one Toxic left, so I have to instead settle for putting Alakazam to sleep with a Yawn. Now that he's asleep, I take the opportunity to bring Exeggutor back in and heal up a little and go for Reflect again, although the timing is a bit off from what I wanted to do. I decide not to take any risks, and right on cue he wakes up and fires a Psychic into Snorlax. With 1 HP left, I decide to send in Ninetales in hopes of having Charizard come in last for when Alakazam falls, but it blasts us with a critical hit Psychic. Thankfully, he's bulky enough to survive, and Exeggutor still comes in instead of Charizard. Gary's tree doesn't have nearly the same caliber of moves that mine does. His only damaging moves are Giga Drain and Egg Bomb, both of which are not a problem for Venusaur to deal with as it's able to poison his plant. He hits me with a taste of my own medicine and puts Venusaur to sleep, so I bring in the big guns to watch his tree get chopped down, but Gary had other plans. I forgot he had one more full restore. At this point, I'm not really in any danger, but this battle has gone on long enough. We're so close to the end. Snorlax connects with his final Toxic PP and outlasts Exeggutor, meaning his last Pokemon, the most difficult one to deal with, comes in. I don't want to deal with any nonsense, so I opt to put it to sleep with a yawn so Lapras can have as safe of a switch in as possible. For one last time, Snorlax sleeps in solidarity with his opponent, and then Lapras sings one last sad song to commemorate the downfall of our rival. I send in Snorlax on the final turn of Perish Song, Eyes Still Closed. He doesn't even respect him enough to look at his Charizard as it drops. With that, I've defeated a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon LeafGreen without using a single damaging move. That was insane. The early game was definitely the most difficult part, trying to level up my team with limited options. The later parts of the game certainly weren't without its challenges, and navigating the battles in a completely different way than I'm used to really made me think about every move I was making. Did I have fun? Yeah. Eventually. Would I recommend anybody else do this? Only if you're an emotionally damaged individual. If you want to see more videos from this emotionally damaged individual, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Well, it's about time for me to head out. Thanks for watching, and I'll smell you later.